Sometimes, I stop to think about how my inner world seems to reflect in everything around me. I wonder if the things that happen to me are mere coincidences, or if, in some way, my own energy shapes reality. That was when I came across a principle that resonated deeply within me. As above, so below. It's not just an ancient phrase, it's a truth I feel in the depths of my being. I didn't discover it in a book, nor was it solemnly taught to me. I found it on the edge of a despair that seemed to have no way out. I remember that night vividly. The room was a chaos of crumpled papers, broken thoughts, unbearable silences. I felt trapped in a cycle of mistakes and losses, as if everything I touched inevitably crumbled. I searched for answers everywhere outside myself, in signs, in coincidences, in the words of others, but all I found was a void echoing the same question back at me. Why? It was in that moment of exhaustion, of surrender, that my eyes landed on an old, dust-covered book on my shelf. The Kybalion, have you heard of it? It's a book shrouded in mystery, attributed to the enigmatic 3 initiates, who supposedly condensed in it the principles of Hermeticism, a stream of wisdom that has survived through the ages. I opened it without expectations, my mind too tired to question anything. Have you ever had that happen? Stumbling upon something seemingly simple that, for some reason, resonates deeply within you. There it was, a phrase that didn't seem to say much, yet said everything. As above, so below. As within, so without. A principle that claims the microcosm and the macrocosm mirror each other, that what happens in the depths of our psyche echoes in the external world, and vice versa. Have you ever thought about this? How the emotions you carry within seem to color everything you see outside. At first it meant nothing, just words, but something inside me resisted ignoring them, and that resistance turned into an obsession. When I first discovered this principle, I didn't fully understand it. But then, I looked at my own life. I realized that whenever my mind was in chaos, everything around me seemed to fall apart. And in moments of peace, everything flowed almost magically. Was this just perception, or was there a real connection between what lived inside me and what manifested outside? Little by little, I began to understand that this idea was not just philosophical or mystical, it was real. Every emotion, every thought, every belief inside me reflected in my relationships, my opportunities, and the way I experienced life. And with that revelation came an even more unsettling one. If the world was my reflection, then my fears, my shadows, and my nightmares inhabited it too. When I felt insecure, the world seemed to reinforce that insecurity. Doors closed, people treated me with indifference. But when I started trusting myself, life responded. Confidence attracted confidence. Security opened paths. And yet, every time doubt whispered in my ear, reality seemed to tilt in its favor, as if it fed on my deepest fears. I learned that the way I treated myself determined how others treated me. When I stopped belittling myself, when I learned to give myself love and respect, my relationships changed. I discovered that I couldn't expect the world to give me what I denied myself, but I also understood that just as I could build myself up, I could also destroy myself. How many times had I been my own executioner without realizing it? How many times had I drawn into my life the very shadows I swore to avoid? And worst of all, how many times had I mistaken this self-destructive cycle for fate, for an inevitable punishment? I wondered if I truly had control over my life, or if I was just a puppet of my own thoughts, repeating patterns I didn't even recognize as mine. Was I directing my own story, or was I just an echo of past wounds? Perhaps, without realizing it, I had turned my own mind into a prison, and every decision I made was a reflection of the bars I had built myself. Looking up at the night sky made me feel small, yet immensely connected. I wondered if that vastness was also a reflection of what dwelt within me, if that dark abyss, speckled with distant lights, was in some way an image of my own being. You know, it reminded me of that poem by Emily Dickinson, a certain slant of light on winter afternoons that oppresses like the weight of cathedral tunes. Her words made me think about how we carry within us the same duality the universe reflects. We waver between light and shadow, between the search for meaning and the emptiness of existence. Dickinson, in her lucid despair, seemed to grasp something many of us fear to face, that within us dwells both night and day, that in our hollow grace also lies the irony of uncertainty. How many times have we felt our lives oscillate between these poles without a resting point? Isn't that tension what defines us, what drives us to seek beyond the obvious? Perhaps accepting this dance of contrasts is the first step toward truly understanding ourselves. This idea of adjusting to darkness, of stumbling until our eyes learn to see in the dimness, resonated within me with unexpected force. Isn't that how life works? We face moments of shadow, and at first we stumble, we hesitate, but little by little, we learn to see in the darkness, to decipher its language. It was as if every cell in my body reflected the dance of the stars. I felt that I, too, was part of the whole, that my existence was not an accident, but a reflection of something greater. But even in the vastness of the cosmos, there is darkness, and I wondered what part of me dwells in that infinite blackness, how much of my own shadow is projected onto the vastness of the universe. And if, alongside that shadow, there is also an infinite greatness waiting to be discovered, what if we are not just light and darkness, but the endless interplay of contrasts that make them exist? Perhaps the shadow is not just a reflection of what I fear, but also of what I have yet to understand. Perhaps in that depth, in that abyss that sometimes terrifies me, lies the seed of something I have yet to name, something that, if I had the courage to face without fear, could transform me forever. I couldn't change my life without changing myself. I realized that every external battle I fought, every obstacle I tried to overcome, had its root within me. Only when I dared to look inward, to confront my fears, to embrace my shadows, did the world outside begin to change. But embracing the shadow does not mean destroying it. Sometimes, the darkness does not leave. Sometimes, you simply learn to live with it, to listen to its whispers, without letting them consume you, to carry its weight without letting it crush you. It becomes a part of you, not as a sentence, but as a constant test of your own strength. And perhaps, in that coexistence, you discover that within its depth, there is wisdom, that in its silence, there are answers, that not all darkness is an enemy, that sometimes the shadow is merely the echo of a light you have yet to recognize. As above, so below, stopped being just a phrase for me. It became a constant reminder that life is not something that happens to me, but something I co-create with every thought, every emotion, and every action. I can't control the world, but I can work on my inner world, and in doing so, the outer world inevitably transforms. But there is one thing I will never be able to change, the existence of the shadow, because without it, light would have no meaning. Tell me, have you felt it too? That the world outside seems to mirror what lives within you? Have you ever stopped to observe it, to question it, to face it? I'd love to know what you've discovered in that reflection. Let me know in the comments. Share this video if it resonated with you, and subscribe to support this content.